As I said, I was going to begin a study on the church government, God's government, and I wanted to cover this because for many, many years, 20 years or so, I have been exposed to this Church of God teaching about God's government being from top down. You know, it's taken many years for me to examine and explore this, what I say is a myth today, because there's been many misapplied scriptures, many misappropriated scriptures to people within the Church of God. And every time you bring the subject up, they get very adamant, as their leader that they had, Herbert Armstrong, back in the Worldwide Church of God, would, you know, and he wrote this book here, Mystery of the Ages, that kind of laid it out and cemented it down. And yet, you know, there are people who still go around teaching this myth. It isn't the truth. And this guy here, Meredith, recently wrote an article about how he's got 3 things that identify him as the one that God's working with more effectively. And certainly I just think he's just a very egotistical type person. And certainly he got a big head, full of vanity and pride. And so, you know, he said that he wanted to give someone $1,000 in his most recent production of church government, from his point of view, that he'd give him $1,000 if they could prove to him that the government of God was not, well, basically being represented in himself, I would say. So it's not top down from Meredith on down, or Gerald Flurry on down, or any other human leader. There's no such thing as a headquarters church that is in Charlotte, or what's the other place, Edmond, Oklahoma, or Cincinnati, Ohio. These are all church corporations. They have nothing to do with the true Church of God, and that's what this study is about. Try to get people who have been called to focus in on what the government of God is, and if they're not connected to the head of the church, Jesus Christ, and they're connected mainly through a human head, which is not very smart in the first place, but also it's not what the Bible teaches us to do. And certainly the Apostle Paul, as we'll get into the study, shows, and in the previous video, Truth or Silence, pointed out that Paul said that, you know, in Corinthians, that people were choosing leaders to follow, and one would follow this one, and they'd think that was better leader, or another person would follow another leader because they thought that was better. And of course, this is what we've got today. The same identical circumstance, people being divided up among men, and the body of Jesus Christ is not able to prosper and grow in the gifts of the Spirit because of it. And, you know, these people wondering why they don't have the healings and stuff like that. Well, because their focus is totally off of the head of the church. And they don't look to the Father, and they don't look to Jesus Christ either. They look to themselves and running on their own steam. So with that, we'll get started with this first part, and I'll be referencing material I have on my already prepared on my computer, and I'll be reading from there, so as you see me glance back and forth. But it is the body of what I want to talk about. We'll talk about the government of God and what it is. This article is written by Keith Hunt. You can find the full article on his site, which is keithhunt.com. A very excellent site, as I said before, for biblical topics. Not much that I would disagree with him about on that at all. Anything that I would add while I go through this study, I would try to differentiate between what he's done. And I'm only excerpting part of what he's done, but I do hope I have his permission, which I think I do, not to try to twist it into something that is not so. So that's the main thing, is not try to put words in someone's mouth. If I feel that I don't totally agree, I'll say so. And if I find that I agree a great deal, you'll notice I'll get very loud and excited. But anyway, I'm going to begin with his opening statement on his church government articles. You can go to his website again, look under the church government, and you'll find probably 20 or more articles discussing many of the things. And I want to go through some of those articles and bring them out on YouTube to kind of get you to maybe go there and study a little more. But if not, I want to try to get the main thrust or the body of what he's trying to say, and which I am in agreement with him on, and many others are also. Beginning, ancient Israel before the New Testament Church of God began was called the church in the wilderness. As it says in Acts verse 38, it was organized from the top down. There was God, then Moses. Under Moses there were elders, captains over thousands and hundreds, and so on down the pyramid of the chain of authority. Israel's church state government was theocratical, from God down to a specific human leader who had total authority and leadership over every other person in the nation. Was Israel's type of government to be carried over into the church of the new covenant? If so, then who should be able to find, or we should be able to find, ample evidence to support this teaching from the writings of the New Testament? Let us humbly search to find the truth of the matter. And this is the whole crux of the problem here, is that it is cited back in the Old Testament how the government of God was used, and it was down to, like he says, a specific human leader, and people have tried to transpose that same sort of teaching over into the New Testament church, and that is not to be the way that Christ wants it. Again, this is written by Keith Hunt. We have recorded for us in the four Gospels 3 separate incidents where Jesus could have made it very plain to them, meaning the disciples, who he had chosen to be chief among them and head of all the ministers in the church, the one with final authority and the power of veto. The first incident is found in Mark chapter 9, verse 33 through 35. The same account is given in Matthew 18 and Luke 9, where we read, "And they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, 'What were you discussing on the way?' But they were silent. For on the way they had discussed with one another who was the greatest. And he sat down and called the 12. Now, the scripture in the New Testament talks about how other ministers at that time wanted to have the preeminence. And it speaks of one that had the preeminence. And this is what we're talking about. People who want to be more important, or the most important to God and to the church of God in this age. But this is along the same lines. Here was Jesus' golden opportunity to tell them the governmental structure he wanted among themselves. Here was his chance to declare to them the 1, 2, 3 in the authority line. But what did he say? And he said to them, if anyone would be first, if they desired to be or wanted to be, he must be last of all and servant of all. And that's from the Revised Standard Version. Jesus did not even hint that there was to be a pyramid type of church structure. He told them that if anyone in their own mind desired such a position as being top dog, or we could say presiding evangelist or prophet or whatever their title may be, that person had better put himself last and be servant to all the others. And to be the greatest in God's sight is to be humble and put such a desire of exaltation out of your mind and go about serving. it comes to my mind, that's what our politicians tell us, is that they're servants, and yet we know that they basically serve themselves first. Well, we have the same problem within the Church of God, is that these people claim that they're serving, but yet they have the best seats in the house, they have the best positions, the best, kind of salaries and all that. They make out like they're paupers, but they really aren't. And a little bit of investigation into that wouldn't be too bad. But anyway, continue on. Months went by, and the disciples, or at least two of them, forgot what Jesus had taught them. It is human nature to think that in a group of 12, surely someone must be the greatest. And maybe that someone is me, and that's what they think. That someone is them. On a certain day, James and John came to Jesus and asked him if they could be the ones to sit on his right hand and left hand in the kingdom. And Jesus said only the Father had the authority to decide who would be given those positions. It was not for him or for them to decide. And you see that in Mark chapter 10, verse 35 through 40. And certainly, that kind of answers it all, doesn't it? I mean, if there was anybody that was next in line, they would be right beside Christ, to his left and to his right, and that hasn't even been decided yet. The account in Mark continues to say, and when the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant at James and John, and Jesus called them to him and said to them, you know that those who are supposed to rule over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. They were not to exercise rulership over each other. They were not to be like the governments of this world, having a system of dictatorial pyramid authority. Continuing. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. That's verses 43 to 44. And even after these two separate incidents, there still arose a third time when a dispute also arose among them, which of them would be regarded as the greatest. And that's Luke 22, verse 24. Jesus again told them they were not to be like the governments of this world. He gave them his example. Be a servant. Do not have the I'm the greatest attitude. He did specifically promise those 12, Matthias replacing Judas in Acts 2, a throne each, ruling one tribe of Israel in the kingdom. Matthew 19, verse 28. But he never said any of those thrones would be above the others, just as he never said any one of them would be above the rest in authority in this physical life within the function of the church. What Jesus taught them over and over again was to have love and service among themselves. What he inspired Peter to tell all elders was that they should be humble and be willing to be subject to each other. Now, some teach that